Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today we're going to be going over one of the most famous Paladin skills pretty much of all time, and that is Zeal. Zeal is a skill that has seen some pretty crazy changes over the years, one of which is the reduction in the number of hits down to a maximum of 5. A long time ago, back in the eons and eons ago when I was a young kid, Zeal used to actually continually scale all the way up to a maximum number of hits of infinity. If you had level 99 Zeal, it would hit 99 times. It was just actually kind of silly. And I had actually leveled up a Paladin with level 20 Zeal that hit like 25 times because of my plus to skills. And it was a little ridiculous, I'm not going to lie. And I can totally see why they had brought it down, because, I mean, it was literally like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and if you accidentally hit it a second time, which I would do sometimes by accident, it was another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. And it was just absolutely silly. And sometimes you would get stuck in an infinite loop of attacks until your weapon broke, and then you start punching them, which is silly. So I can totally understand why they brought Zeal down to 5 hits, because, well, it was kind of silly, and you couldn't actually put more than like 5 points in the dang thing anyway, because if you did, it would just lock you in an infinite loop of attacking, which is pretty silly. Zeal has some pretty good advantages over a lot of the other abilities. Most notably is its ability to attack multiple targets, as well as a single target multiple times. So it's kind of hard to explain exactly what Zeal does without actually going out and playing with it. So let's go out and take our Zeal to a target, and let's do a little bit of bonkening, shall we? So first off, one of the most important things with Zeal is just simply the fact that it hits multiple times. So if you go out to any monster, doesn't matter what monster it is, and you attack the monster, it will hit 5 times. If there is 5 monsters, it will hit the 5 monsters 5 times. If there is 1 monster, it will hit the 1 monster 5 times. It's actually quite interesting the way that Zeal works out, because it is a very fast ability. As you can clearly see, I'm hitting many times. And it does pretty good damage, too. It's one of those abilities that just tends to get used a lot, and it's really because of a lot of different reasons. First off is, well, it has pretty good attack speed. Comparatively to a regular attack, it's actually about double the speed of a regular attack. You can, if you max out the attack speed of a regular attack, for instance, you can get about, I think it's like 3.5 attacks per second or something like that. I was actually just looking this up on Amazon Basin. 3.125 attacks per second, which is not a whole lot, but it's decent. However, if you max out Zeal, you can get a maximum of 5.21 attacks per second, which is a hell of a lot faster than the regular attacks will ever get. And a lot of abilities like Sacrifice, Vengeance, Conversion are all pretty much the same as a regular attack anyway, so you can't really max them out fast enough to compete with the way that Zeal works. Now, Zeal doesn't have the highest damage output. This is something that's important. The higher damage output skill is definitely Sacrifice and Charge, but Sacrifice and Charge are very poor when it comes to dealing with large groups of monsters. There is, however, some bad things about Zeal. One of the worst things about Zeal is getting stuck in the middle of a group of monsters. Because Zeal spreads out the damage to everything around you, it tends not to hit one target multiple times if there is multiple targets around, which means that in a situation when you're surrounded, which is very deadly for a Zealer, the Zeal is just going to hit everything around you in a circle, spreading the damage out very poorly, as opposed to focusing the damage on a single target. Abilities like Sacrifice, Smite, Charge, Vengeance, even Conversion have a much better time at focusing damage on a single target. However, Zeal, when you are fighting a single target, will hit that single target all 5 times because there's nothing else nearby to touch, which is kind of weird, like when you're actually utilizing it. And you'll know exactly when you need to use something else other than Zeal. In many situations where I get surrounded by a huge number of monsters, I might use something like Sacrifice to save my life in that situation, because otherwise I'll just be stuck in an infinite loop of Zealing everything around me in a circle, killing pretty much nothing. And in this way, it works very similarly to Fury on the Druid, if you've ever played around with that. Zeal does, however, offer the fastest attack speed out of all of the abilities. Even Smite, which I think caps out very close to Zeal. But a 4-frame Zeal will definitely still beat Smite in terms of raw attack speed. And number of hits, which is kind of important. The number of hits allows you to proc effects or to apply elemental damage, which is why Zeal ends up being chosen the most out of all the abilities. Because Smite, well, can't apply elemental damage, and on top of that, it's not very good for multi-damage effects anyway. So if you're using things like Holy Fire, Holy Freeze, Holy Shock, or you're trying to set up a build that revolves around proccing effects, like for instance, maybe you're using Voice of Reason, or you're using another item that has proccing effects on it, Zeal tends to be the best choice just simply for the number of sheer hits that it provides, along with the proccing effects themselves, because the more hits that you can obtain, the more chances you have at rolling those proccing effects. And the same thing goes for the elemental damage. If you're doing 10,000 elemental damage per hit, then increasing the number of hits is the easiest way to increase your damage output, because you can attack more times and apply that damage to the target more times. Zeal cannot be interrupted while it is Zealing. It's actually written right here in Amazon Basin. It says, sequences aren't interrupted by blocking, casting, hit recovery, being knocked back, or stunned. So what it means by a sequence is 5 attacks. So once the 5 attacks is up, and you are moving on to the next sequence, you can, of course, be interrupted in between the sequences. But while the sequence is actually active, you cannot be interrupted during that time period. I don't think it was always that way, because I remember getting interrupted back in the day. But I could be remembering wrong. I do remember several times I would attack 25 times in a row without interruption, so maybe it was always that way. However, in between the sequences, it definitely can be interrupted, so be aware that you might not be able to start the next sequence if you're getting wailed on too heavily. It doesn't really have a very high mana cost, but early on in the game, it can be very difficult to utilize to a good extent. It's only 2 mana cost, and it stays at 2 mana cost pretty much forever. But the problem is that early on in the game, you only have like 15 mana, and 2 mana is actually a lot when you only have 15 mana. So a lot of the times, you won't really be able to utilize Zeal to its maximum benefit early on. It does have one synergy, which is Sacrifice, and Sacrifice is actually kind of a nice one to pair with Zeal, because it gives you a single target ability to use in the cases when you're surrounded. So whenever you do get surrounded with a million monsters and Zeal is not quite working out for you anymore, you can swap over and use Sacrifice for a little while to bust your way out of the giant wall of monsters that's surrounding you. Sacrifice tends to work pretty well, just not as well as Zeal, which is a much faster and higher damage ability versus most targets. One of the main issues I find with Zeal is getting enough attack rating to actually make it useful. Attacking fast is not enough. You need to actually be able to hit the target multiple times. Who cares if you can hit 5 times, 5.21 attacks per second, when you're missing 3 out of those 5 attacks every single time you swing. So part of the issue with Zeal is getting enough attack rating that you're actually hitting your target on a regular basis. Now, to do that, you're going to need other secondary abilities. Like, for instance, Fanaticism tends to go very well with Zeal, and that will get you a rather large amount of attack rating. But if you're using something like Holy Fire, Holy Freeze, or Holy Shock, that's not an option. Another option is Blessed Aim, which will give you a passive attack rating bonus depending on how many points you put into it. At maximum, it'll give you a 100% increase in your attack rating. But the main ways to get attack rating with Zeal honestly come from things like Raven Frost, charms that will give you attack rating, and basically any item that's going to give you raw attack rating instead of attack rating percentage. Because raw attack rating tends to give you a much larger bonus in general. As you can see, Raven Frost only has 250 attack rating on it and 20 dex, which is 1 dex per 5 attack rating. So that gives us a total of 350 attack rating on this ring. But you'll notice that we go from 5,328 to 8,023, which is a pretty massive bump in attack rating for one item. And this is because of all the percentage pluses that we have. So if you notice, there's a 350% bonus attack rating on Zeal, and if we were to put points into Fanaticism, we would have a nice 180% attack rating on Fanaticism, which is going to get us even more. And then we could also throw points into Blessed Aim, which gets us a 100% passive bonus. And then that 350 attack rating becomes even more. Now you can see we're going from 6,574 to 9,899. Getting enough attack rating on a Zealer is often one of the biggest challenges when it comes to this particular character, because bonus attack rating isn't enough. Percentage bonus attack rating is almost useless in the world of Diablo because raw attack rating is so much more powerful in most situations, because you will get plenty of plus percentage from abilities. I mean, I have 350% from Zeal right now. I've got another 180% from Fanaticism. I've got 200% from the Ashrion's Iron Ward. I've got another 20% from the Herald of Zakharum, and so forth and so on. And all of that basically means nothing if I don't have any raw attack rating to back it up. And to demonstrate that, let me go ahead and drop the Raven Frost. I'll drop my attack rating ring. We'll throw these charms on the ground, which give lots of AR. And you'll notice that my attack rating drops pretty drastically down to 4,607. And I have other attack rating sources on too, like for instance, my Annihilus charm is currently giving me 20 attributes, which 20 attributes is 100 attack rating. That's another 100 attack rating, just lost straight there. And then Hellfire Torch is also giving me 20 attributes, which is more attack rating. And as you can see, before too long, all my attack rating is just gone out the window. Raw attack rating in general just tends to work much better when it comes to Zealers and physical damage characters, unless you're using a skill that doesn't utilize attack rating, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people tend to lean more towards Smite, because Smite hits no matter what and doesn't care about attack rating. It's one of those magical abilities that doesn't have to deal with attack rating problems. Now, why is attack rating so important with Zeal when it comes to your usefulness of the ability? It's just because hitting fast doesn't mean anything unless you're actually hitting the target. And you'll come across many situations where Zealers are running in, they're attacking very quickly, but it's pretty much just 5 whiffs. You know, it's like miss, 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 hit, miss, miss, hit, miss, miss. And it's terrible damage-wise. If you're not actually landing the hits, if you're not actually hitting anything, you're not going to dish out any damage no matter how fast you're attacking, and no matter how cool your arm looks when you're swinging, and no matter how satisfying it is when you finally get that one bonk on the target. Honestly, though, Zeal is probably like one of the best skills that Paladin has. It's a 1-point wonder. It is a skill that you can maximize. And in many different ways, in many different builds, it becomes useful. Whether you're doing a Holy Fire Paladin, a Holy Freeze Paladin, a Holy Shock Paladin, a Fanaticism Zealer, a Sanctuary Zealer, all sorts of different abilities and fun things can be done with Zeal, including building proc characters based off of items like Voice of Reason. And it just generally is one of the, I think, most used abilities within the Paladin tree. And even if it's just 1 point, even if you don't put any points into the synergy, even if you're just 1 point wondering Zeal, it still tends to be extremely useful. Even characters like frickin' Hammerdins will use an occasional Zeal strike every now and then. Even even non-melee characters will use a Zeal strike every now and then because Zeal is just arguably better than regular attacking. And if you're going to attack a target for whatever reason, and you have at least 1 point in Zeal, which most paladins usually do, why not use Zeal instead of a regular attack? One thing to talk about is the breakpoints with Zeal. Now, Zeal has some very odd breakpoints, and let me bring up the breakpoint calculator real quick, and we'll talk about this. So, when it comes to Zeal, Zeal has a IAS table that looks like this. With 0 IAS, you're looking at 6 frames basically per attack, and the last attack always has a little bit more frames than the others. So when people talk about 4-frame Zeal, what they're talking about is the 4-4-4-4-8 frame attack. So what this means is that each attack within the sequence is taking 4 frames, and the last attack is taking 8 frames. That is your 4-frame Zeal, which is actually a pretty nice breakpoint to reach on a Zeal Paladin. That nets you a total of 5.2 attacks per second, which is pretty darn nice. And if we were to actually put that into quantifiable terms as far as something like, say, Holy Shock goes, let's take Holy Shock. We were looking at Holy Shock earlier, which does about 10,000 damage per hit, divided by 2, which gives us an average damage of about 5,000 damage per hit, right? So we're dishing out 5.2 attacks per second, which means we multiply 5,000 average damage times 5.2, which gets us a average damage per second of about 26,000. So 26,000 average damage per second for utilizing Zeal. That's, of course, if we land all 5 hits, which isn't always the case, but sometimes we do. There's also some other very interesting builds that you could utilize with the Zeal, 4-frame Zeal. My God Zealer, which I build, which is very interesting. Dream Paladins, Dragon Paladins, all sorts of very interesting things. Zeal is even something that is utilized not on the Paladin. Utilizing on a Sorceress, you can actually make a Zeal Sorceress using things like Dream Helmets and Dream Shields. I've seen a couple different sorceresses using various Zeal and even Vengeance abilities, and they're actually pretty interesting to play around with. Building a melee sorceress is definitely something that's a little bit of a challenge and kind of fun. All in all, I definitely think Zeal is an S tier, probably a plus skill that usually gets utilized more often than not on most Paladin builds. Over top of pretty much everything else with the exception of Smite. Like if I had to rank the abilities in terms of like how good they are, it probably goes Zeal, Smite, Sacrifice, Charge. Well, actually, Sacrifice, Vengeance, Charge, and then the last one would probably be Conversion as far as the melee skills go. It's not really super useful. Meh. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just yakking about Zeal. And put down in the comments if you guys remember the frickin' 25 frickin' attack Zeal from back in the day. As always, keep watching.